Hey Laowinners, it's ADVChina here with another stream, and now I have to do another live check. Caroline Dasley says, got it. Cool. I want to say thanks to my new mod that is in the chat. If you get shadow banned by him, I trust his judgment, and you deserved it. And otherwise, this is going to be a very chilled out stream. Got a lot of stuff on the cards, huge projects coming at you. Early January, like I said previously. Something huge coming from me and Winston, so stay tuned for that. We just got back literally 2 seconds ago from pulling off something from that project, and it's awesome. I am in such a good mood today because of it. I can't believe we pulled it off, and I can't wait to share it with you guys. I am about 80% done with the first episode of this new project. It's going to be about 35 minutes long per episode. And it's taken me ages to edit, but I'm starting to get in the flow of things. I'm starting to get the hang of how this editing procedure is going to work for this new project. So anyway, I hope you guys are super, super pumped. And I can't tell you, unfortunately. I can't tell you because it is a super secret project. But as the time gets closer, there's definitely going to be some teasers dropped on my channel, Winston's channel, and ADVChina for sure. Tomorrow... And don't forget, we're going to do the stories. Chill out, bruh dofu. Chill out. Tomorrow's the podcast. Don't forget, every other Thursday, ADV podcast. If you guys haven't subscribed to that, please do. Otherwise, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about this huge misconception that people have about dating in China or dating Chinese girls. Or not only that, it's like the kind of situation that I was in. So I want to give like a really big disclaimer here. Sorry. My voice is cracking. I'm starting to hit puberty again. Okay, disclaimer. Vivi was the first Chinese girl that I dated, okay, in China. A lot of people think, wow, 10 years in China, you married the first girl that you met, right? It's not so simple. It's not so simple. Although I did marry the first girl that I dated, both of us didn't see each other for a long time. I want to say it was a long distance relationship, but it kind of wasn't. Like the first year we were together, it wasn't like a massively serious thing. Everyone knew that I was going to probably check out another place. I ended up going to Taiwan. We stayed in touch. She came to visit. I went to visit. Like we still hung out. But it wasn't like a super committed, amazing, serious relationship. There was just, that wasn't on the cards at the time. So we eventually ended up together after maybe like 7 years in China, like ended up permanently together, getting married and, properly falling in love. But yeah, that didn't happen for a while, and I think that's really normal. It's really natural. I think a lot of people rush into relationships and they end up getting hurt, either the girl or the dude or whatever the scenario is. Gotta be PC here, right? I think a lot of people end up getting hurt and they end up regretting a lot of their decisions because they didn't properly think it out. They didn't actually, play the field, so to speak. Now, I'm not advocating for being a promiscuous man or woman. What I'm advocating for is that I think getting to know a lot of different people and not just jumping the gun and being like, yes, I knew at first sight when our eyes met and we just, oh my gosh, my heart was fluttering and it was just so amazing. It was magical. I think a lot of people get into that scenario and then 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, that wears off. And I'm not calling out anyone here, but I get so many emails, especially on Patreon, which is awesome and I really appreciate it. But let this be like a public warning to a lot of people out there. The majority of my emails, the majority of my Patreon messages are people that are asking for serious help because they ended up in a relationship, and it's usually from someone from another culture and specifically from China, and they fell in love with this person, and then fast forward 3 or 4 months later, and they realize that they can't even communicate with that person. They either ended up with someone that doesn't speak English or they don't speak Chinese. And in the beginning, the beautiful exoticism of the whole thing, the amazing feeling of, wow, I can't believe I'm in this different place, but we just managed to understand each other even though we don't speak the same language. It's almost this movie Hollywood portrayed experience of what they think it should be like, and then eventually they just find out the truth. At the end of the day, if you can't communicate with someone, all that beautiful stuff in the past where like you can hold hands and look at each other and fall in love every single minute and you're so excited to see them, you look at their pictures on your phone, all that stuff doesn't matter anymore when you need to figure out like what to cook for dinner, or you need to figure out who's going to buy toilet paper, or you need to figure out who's going to clean the kitchen tonight. That stuff is actually the day-to-day stuff. And again, like, I don't want to discount the fact that you can make something work out of something very inconvenient, but that is my disclaimer. That is my warning to people, is that every single time I get an email from these people that have problems, it's because of communication issues. And it's not so much cultural. That's a whole different barrier, and that's stuff that I'll talk about in my stories today. But at the end of the day, the communication is just so freaking important, because if you can't actually express how you feel, the first emotion is like confusion and like, holy crap, how do I tell her this, or how do I tell him this? The second emotion is just frustration and anger, and that boils over so much more violently and quicker than somebody you can actually sit down and talk to about your feelings and emotions and whatever. So my warning is to really, really be careful about dating or getting in a relationship with someone that you can't properly communicate with. Trust me on this. It's exotic and fun, but it is not something that you want to get into. I will be doing Q&A, by the way, so don't be scared to throw your questions in here. I'll scroll through. Now, let me get into what kind of, especially my first experiences. When I was in the US, I never had a specific attraction to any sort of country's people, if that makes sense. I grew up in a small town. It was just white people pretty much. A lot of black people too, but like predominantly just white people everywhere. So the people I naturally were around and attracted to were white girls. That's who I dated. And thankfully I had good role models in my life. Like my mom and dad were really cool. They never let me like sleep around, but they definitely were okay with the fact that I could date a person and then move on, and it doesn't work out, move on. And that was the whole learning process. So I was lucky to be in a situation where that wasn't demonized, because a lot of my friends, especially like I grew up in a really religious household, but like a lot of my friends who also grow up in religious households, their mom would be, or mom, especially mom, but mom and dad would be very vehement and be like, don't get in a relationship unless you know you're serious. Whereas my situation was more like, go ahead, like play the field, it's fine. You know, you'll find someone you like eventually. And I think they knew that saved a lot of heartbreak for the future. And I seriously, from the bottom of my heart, I'm so happy that they were never, you know, like punishing me for dating around, because that really led me to a much more mature decision on my relationship and how to like figure out who's good for you, right? It's not a selfish thing. It's like how to find someone compatible, not someone that you like absolutely head over heels love, right? Vivi, and my other disclaimer is Vivi, my current wife, this is a joke for ADVChina people. If you watched our episode about, I think it was like Vietnamese people having more fun, somebody said their current wife and the comment section went wild. But anyway, Vivi, my wife, my first wife and my current wife, we have a very, very good level of communication. Like we talk about everything together. She's my best friend. And I'm of the opinion, I think I would go mentally insane if I didn't marry my best friend. We have to get along. We have to be able to talk about everything. We can't hold grudges and stuff like that. So we talk about exes. We talk about relationships. She loves it. She eats it up, and we both do. It's fun. It's our past, right? We already decided who we're going to be with. And a lot of people in the comment section, a lot of people around me, I think they just don't quite understand that, because they're either with somebody that is very vindictive and very jealous, or they just don't have that level of communication with their spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend. So we talk about everything. So the stuff I'm going to talk about today, Vivi's heard years ago, and it doesn't matter, okay? She's going to watch this and laugh just like she always does, and I always laugh about her exes. which I won't go into because it's not my place to talk about. But I can talk about some of the experiences I had. So when I first got to China, I wasn't immediately attracted to the idea of getting into a relationship, especially with somebody that I couldn't really communicate with. Never had this like unexplained attraction to Asian people, if that makes sense. I was more into the idea of like, I want someone to hang out and chill with, and this is kind of hard to do when I don't speak Chinese. So immediately I started learning Chinese, but it took ages, you know, like I was at a communicative level of Chinese maybe about after a year, but like when I say communicative, like I couldn't talk about like medical malpractice or something, or like legal statutes. I could talk about like my likes and dislikes and, you know, where I went and what my hobbies were and things like that. But after 2 or 3 years, I started to get to a level where I could really have conversations and really get to know people. So I tried some dating. I dated people. This is well before dating apps and internet dating sites and stuff in China. So that was totally off the cards. But when I first got there, I did what any normal young 22-year-old man does, and I used to go to bars and clubs. And I know that attracts a certain type of people in my home country, but you could meet just everyday people you know from school, people you go to college with and stuff. So that was a normal kind of place for me to meet people. Little did I know in China, like that's, especially at that time, that's where bad people went, right? And I had no impression of what a bad person was or what a bad scene was or what people I should or shouldn't be associating with. But oftentimes, like my colleagues or people I knew, friends, they would get to know a girl and maybe she'd come hang out after the club at the apartment and they wouldn't leave. They would just stay there. They'd be like, "You have a computer?" And they'd stay there and play like Farmville or whatever the hell games were around back then. Keep in mind, this is before Facebook was banned. And they would just sit there and basically squat until they'd have to like call our boss to like get him kicked out. And then you realize quickly that these kind of people are just like, they're from the countryside, but they didn't have a job, and they're just hanging out at clubs to meet people, and like a foreigner invites them home, and they're suddenly eating out of their fridge and like playing on their computer for 3 days. It's not so much like that anymore at all. That was back when China was quite a bit poorer. But if you guys are super OG fans of Laowinners, and I'm talking about like super, super OG, I told the story about the club girl. Now, this is like really within the immediate arrival of me in China. Now, what happened was when I first got there, I actually was lucky because I was getting paid a very minute salary. I'm talking like, dude, I was making like $600-700 a month, but I got paid during the Chinese New Year break, and that's when I first arrived. So here I am with all this free time to explore and figure things out, but I don't speak Chinese, and everyone goes to travel. And this is what happens with foreigners in China. They go to China, and then when it comes to like a big holiday like Chinese New Year where everyone's traveling around the country, the last thing they want to do is travel around China because it's so crazy. There's literally, look at the crowd behind me, like it's 10 times worse than that. You can't get a train ticket, you can't get a bus ticket because it's just so busy. Everyone's trying to go to their hometowns. Most people are like migrant workers and stuff, especially in Guangdong where I lived. Now, when I was there, I was alone. I didn't have any foreign friends to hang out with. So I went to the club, and this is, keep in mind, this is like around, actually this is real New Year's, but we're still on break for Chinese New Year, like coming up. So it's real New Year's, like I say real as in, as in like the New Year's that people observe worldwide. And there's a huge club celebration. This is a little bit before everyone's going back to their hometowns, but everyone in my school had gone off to travel. So I go to this club, and it's crazy. I mean, they're playing Russian techno, and it's freaking lightsabers everywhere, and there's balloons, and man, the music was horrific, but there was some energy in the air where no one was ashamed. Everyone's just going ape, and there's this pulsating like pneumatic freaking dance floor. It was nuts. And I was getting on there, and I was trying to like, mill around and talk to people, and people were like invite me over their tables, and here's a free beer, like drink with me, chug it down, and like yeah, look at the foreigner go. It's just great, like what's it called, honeymoon period moments of like my first couple weeks in China. And I remember we'd go around to the tables, and like people would give me fruit and drinks and stuff, and we're just getting wasted. And I go back up on the dance floor, and there's this girl, and I'm dancing with her, and she's kind of shy. She's really cute, and we're having a good time, but we haven't said anything. You know, she keeps like pulling my head down. She's super short. She's like yelling stuff in my ear, and I have no idea what she's saying, right? So she was like trying to grab my phone, and this is like ancient dinosaur phone stuff, and I was like, whoa, 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 you know? But actually she was just trying to type stuff to me, and I couldn't read the characters, you know? So we're trying to talk, but we're trying to dance and stuff. And all of a sudden, all the Chinese people around me see that there's a foreigner on the dance floor. And they kind of push me into the middle with her. And we're dancing like for a crowd of, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 people. And the whole huge club around us is watching us too. And I mean, I'm a shit dancer, right? I'm terrible. But she kind of like locked eyes with me. And I didn't know why I did this. It was obviously the booze or whatever. But the beat dropped on this shit like Tetris remix, whatever Russian techno crap that was going on there. And I grabbed her and I threw her into the air like like some sort of sack of potatoes or something. I just chucked her in the air and I caught her. And I put her back on the ground and she just looked shocked and like everyone went silent. But the music starts going ape and everyone starts cheering. There's lightsabers going all over the place. It's like freaking Star Wars in there. Smoke machine goes off. And she kisses me in public. And that was like nuts. It was crazy. She just like wrapped her arms around my neck and just kisses me. And like at that moment I was like, dude, this place is crazy. Like everyone told me that nobody does this kind of stuff. And here we go. Everyone's cheering me on. I'm like this nobody white kid from upstate New York. And I'm just loving it, dude. Like it was the first time I felt like, dude, there's something happening in this country where everyone doesn't have a stick up their ass and like they just want to hang out, and it's really, really cool. So anyway, long story short, she adds her phone number into my phone and her name. Her name is Ren Na, I remember. And I went back to the club I think it was like a couple weeks after the break. And I was going to hang out with her, but somebody pickpocketed my phone in the club. Maybe she was playing the long game. Anyway, you know what's funny? Is like after I got married, I took my friends to the club that were visiting me. They wanted to see what like a crap hole Chinese club was, so I took them to the old haunts. And she was actually there. She was married as well with her husband. And she said hi, and it was super weird, but it was like after so many years. But anyway, that's not a dating story. That was just my first experience of being like a little bit apprehensive about this whole thing. But I don't know. I was kind of dipping my toes in the water, and it was kind of like, you know what? There might be something to this. Everyone seems really easygoing and cool. I kind of had this idea like it's different than in the U.S. Like dating a girl of another race, nobody cares about that in the U.S. But like if you do it in China, then all of a sudden there's this weird stigma, right? You're this foreigner and you're stealing the women. And that's something I found out later. But in the beginning, I didn't do too much of that. You know, I went on a few dates. But more often than not, what would happen is my people I worked with. So I worked at like 3 different places. I worked at my original contract and I did some side work for places. Totally illegal. But that's just what people did. And usually when I had some sort of assistant, so every time you work in like Asia, you'll have like a teaching assistant. What would happen is that person would spend a lot of time with you because they're tasked with keeping an eye on you, making sure everything's okay, making sure the kids are not going ape, and also translating if anything happens. But technically, they're all like on duty out of the classroom as well. So like if you have a problem, you can call them up and stuff. And I never really took advantage of that because I wanted to take care of stuff myself. You know, like big boy over here. But more often than not, what would happen is that these girls had never been in a romantic experience before because they come from the countryside, so they're inherently much more traditional than girls that you find in the city. They usually come from out of province, so they're pretty lonely. And then they're spending a lot of time with a man, which works in a professional setting, but because you're spending so much time together, it's not something that would normally happen in Chinese society where they come from. So there is some sort of weird attachment that happens there, and I was never keen on ever like being in a relationship with somebody I was working with. That was something that was like way off limits for me. I think it's my whole Western mentality, don't shit where you eat. But there were times where like you work with someone and then the contract's over and you move on to something else. And then, that person's still in your life. You enjoyed spending time with them, so you're still hanging out. And that happened a couple times. So there was a girl I dated. Ooh, boy. She was from the interior of China. I don't know what it is. I literally don't know what it is. But every time a girl hit on me, which didn't happen often, like Chinese girls are pretty reserved, right? Every time a girl overtly hit on me, they were from Hubei province, and I literally don't know why. I wasn't in Hubei, I was in Guangdong province. So she was my teaching assistant for a short period of time. She was filling in for someone else, and then we split ways. Got a hold of each other a little while later. Of all things, of all reasons, because actually I had left my jacket, because the weather was getting hot. I left the jacket in a jacket kind of like this. I left it in the classroom, and she had held on to it after all this time. And I have a feeling it was for the explicit reason of getting a hold of me again. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a couple beers or whatever, but like we had spent a couple months together, at work and stuff. I hadn't seen her in a little while, and then I was like, why don't you come over and drop it off? Of all things, I was watching, I still remember this for some reason. I was watching Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, which is the best Star Wars, by the way. All you haters can shut up. Empire Strikes Back is obviously the best movie out of all Star Wars, even if you're not a Star Wars fan. But anyway, I was watching that on my laptop when she showed up, and I literally expected her just to drop it off, but she came in, and we hung out, and we ended up dating for a while, which I thought was a little bit weird because like it just kind of happened. It wasn't like a romantic thing. We were in a relationship for a few months at least. But she invited me over one time. And I was kind of nervous because inviting someone over doesn't mean that you're going to go to their apartment, because she didn't have an apartment. She lived with her parents. Her parents had moved to Guangdong, right? I don't even know if I should get into this. Long story short, this person's parents had interesting connections. And I found things around the abode. I found things around the house that indicated thus. And she also told me that was the case. And she also told me that if we were caught, her dad would kill me. Yet it was totally fine because there's no way he's going to come home. What? I mean, like literally, I don't want to sound like a little beta here or anything, but I mean, when you're in a foreign country and somebody is involved in criminal activity, and then there's a chance that they could find you and kill you because he wouldn't approve of such a thing, even though there's small chances of that happening, you're not gonna want to be in that scenario, if you know what I mean. But I stayed in that scenario for a little while, actually. We ended up parting ways. I moved to Taiwan, and this is kind of interesting. I was taking a chill pill. I was actually talking to Vivi again for a while, and we were still like super good friends. And we would talk all the time. Like I don't know. I wasn't in love yet, but like we were still really chill with each other. But in the beginning of Taiwan, like I had no intentions of being in a relationship. But what I found, I can sum up the experience of the girls that I met in Taiwan, were much less apt to lose their mind at minor stuff, if that makes sense. The girls that I met in Taiwan were so much more like level-headed. I'm sure there's lots of level-headed girls in mainland China, but like so much more relaxed about things. Like obviously if you cheated on them or something, they're going to lose their mind, but like anyone should. But at the end of the day, they were like very much like, if this relationship's not what you want, this relationship is not what I want, I don't think we're like a good match. Like it was kind of amicable. It wasn't like this crazy, like I'm going to cut up your clothes and kill you. Now, at the same time, my friend was dating a girl, when I moved to Taiwan, was dating a girl in mainland China. She found a contact or a text message on his phone. This is before like WeChat or anything like this, from his teaching assistant. It wasn't flirty. It wasn't even remotely promiscuous or insinuating anything, but she was talking about the lesson plan or something, and she forbade him from talking to his teaching assistant outside of the office. But of course she has his number, so she was sending him messages and he wasn't replying and stuff, and she found these messages. And I kid you not, when he was out of the apartment with his friends or doing whatever, like going to buy stuff, she took all of his clothing, literally all of his clothing, and cut it into tiny pieces and then simultaneously like prepared batches of it in the sink to pour lighter fluid on and burn. She legitimately did this. This is legitimately what she did. Then she like went around telling everyone that he was some sort of scumbag, cheater, horrible man, blah, blah. And I was like, he was telling me about this on Skype, and I'm like in Taiwan, I'm like, holy crap, like I'm lucky not to be in that scenario. I feel like there should have been warning signs, and there probably was. So John, if you're out there, I hope things are okay now. We haven't talked in a long time, but yeah, like more often than not, that kind of stuff did happen. I think there's this inherent problem. There's this issue that promiscuity, like amongst married people in China, is definitely quite high, especially if you have money. Like if you have money and you're a Chinese man and you're not cheating on your wife with like going out to business meetings and KTVs and all this kind of stuff, then you're probably in like the below 50% minority. You're the good guy. Because that kind of activity is expected. It's kind of like a trust building exercise that Chinese people do. And I'm not saying this happens with the younger generation, but definitely amongst like my generation and older. I'm talking about like 30 up to 60. If you're a wealthy Chinese man, then you're kind of expected to do this kind of stuff because that's how business deals go down. So that kind of mistrust, that kind of distrust, inherent distrust is like at the core. And I think that really eats away. Because like, if you think about it, it's really wrong, right? To cheat on someone, to have sex with someone that's not your spouse if you're in a committed relationship, especially if that's not been agreed upon by the other person. But it's almost expected. So I feel like it's expected, but it's not liked. Of course, no one's going to like that happening. So what happens is there's this like deep-seated mistrust. And like when they get into a relationship, they've heard all these rumors that foreigners, like especially Westerners, are going to cheat on them. They're going to be open like in Hollywood movies. And I think that really boils something inside that makes them inherently mistrust people and like kind of lose their minds sometimes. And that's something I saw multiple times. A lot of the stories that I have are people that I know. Oftentimes, I'm going to say I dated a lot of people, and a lot of the people that I met, I could see like pretty close to the beginning that this is not going to end well, and I better cut ties right now. I better not get into a deep relationship with this person because mentally it's probably not going to be good. They'll probably be good for a person that's like of the same mental maturity, but this person is not on the same level of mental maturity, not willing to kind of get to know me, is way too distrusting and doesn't want to pursue this further, doesn't actually want to know who I am. They just want to be in a relationship and feel safe, just for a relationship's sake. But yeah, like more often than not, I would hear stories of people getting involved with a girl that has never been in a relationship before, and their first dates are just so awkward because what happens is they're acting like maybe you did as a Westerner in second grade when you finally like touch a girl's hand or like a girl kisses you on the cheek in the tire swing or something. It's that level of emotional maturity. So that all this crazy excitement and like all this like passion and like what's it called, like not knowing what's gonna happen next, and oh my gosh, she's the perfect one for me. All of this in their mind is like leading to potential marriage and like we're gonna be together. I feel safe with him. Everything's gonna be okay. So a lot of those relationships have ended up in pure disaster, absolute disaster. Often, the Westerner, the foreigner has to move to a different city just to avoid this conflict because like it got that crazy. Especially in the older generation, like people like my age, more often than not, if they grew up in the rural part of China, If they had dated someone and someone finds out about that, then they think that they're not marriage material now. And that's quickly changing, absolutely changing very quickly. But yeah, like they'll feel like they're not marriage material and they're going to miss out on like potential future husbands because they got involved with a foreigner. Number one, that makes that way worse, but they got involved with someone before marriage. So it makes their inherent value lower, which is like such a shame because I don't know. That's just how it is. It's not fair. The one outlier to this whole like immaturity thing would be this girl I dated in Inner Mongolia. I dated an Inner Mongolian girl, and she was introduced to me by a friend who brought her to one of our just normal hangouts. We used to go to karaoke and just like hang out and like go get dinner before or afterwards, have some beers. And he brought this girl that he was interested in, that he knew since like childhood or something. And she brought her friend just to accompany her. And she was gorgeous. Like she was this tall Mongolian girl. And she was actually Mongolian, like ethnically Mongolian. Very tall, thin. And she was actually a teacher, and also not an English teacher though. She was like a teacher. I can't remember what subject it was, but she also worked as a car model. And she was so tall, so she could wear the clothes that they required. And she would model for BMW, Mercedes, and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, she was the polar opposite of most Chinese girls I met. She wasn't subdued. She wasn't like quiet. She didn't like let things boil up. She was just really fierce all the time. Like if she didn't like something, she would tell you. And I was like, this is interesting. Very, very different. Even though she was Chinese, spoke Chinese as her first language. She was very different in the way she acted. She was very like mature about certain things, but very uneducated about certain things as well. But at the same time, like we only spoke Chinese with each other, but she was like very much on a level of like, I'm worth something. I have inherent worth, and my opinion matters, and I'm going to tell you. And it was like such a different experience. It was crazy dating her. We were together for quite a while. We honestly, at the end of the day, couldn't be together for that very reason, because like we just disagreed on so many things. And that was actually a really positive experience, because it wasn't this thing that like boiled up over time and be like, I hate you, rah! You know, it was like just grievances throughout the day. It was just things we didn't see eye to eye on, different hobbies, different friends, different like passions in life, different interests. And that was the first time I realized that like different cultures definitely have different attributes. Big time, because I'd only been around Han people the entire time. So that was pretty interesting. And then, yeah, I ended up with my wife. And the reason we ended up together is because we were together for so long. Like, we talked to each other for so many years and got to actually know who we were, like, all faults and foibles. There was no hidden secrets. There was no, like, getting on ceremony and being like, this is... you know, like pretending to be you're super cool, or like I'm so rich, or I have this, or I, you know, like hiding certain things like deficiencies about yourself. There was none of that. It was always just really casual and nice to be around each other, and we always laughed. That was the most important thing, is we actually told each other jokes and could laugh at each other and make fun of each other, and nobody got butthurt. Nobody got upset. It was always just, it was awesome. It was just friendship. It was friendship with love. And I feel like this whole idea of locking eyes with someone that you'll be together with forever is, at least in my case, anecdotally, and from what I've seen with other people, is just not, it's not true. If you want real satisfaction in life, you've got to be with someone you're friends with. And I know that men and women oftentimes cannot be in, how to say, like really close friendships, because there are so many differences with the way that people deal with things. But this is my very old school boomer way of thinking. But if you find someone that is just so much on your level and so fun to be around, that you really love being around, and you just want to hang out with, and you can just be dirty around. You don't have to like, you know, do your hair perfectly every time and put on makeup every time. That's the person you want to be with, because that's the kind of person that's going to tell you, today's your turn to clean the kitchen. Today's your turn to change the diapers, you know. That's the kind of stuff you got to look out for. That's what a long-term relationship is. So through all like my foibles, and I've said foibles a lot in this episode. I apologize. Through all my misfortune and fortune and experiences in dating in America and in China and wherever in the world. Actually, I only dated in Taiwan. Taiwan is its own country, don't forget. Throughout all my experiences, it just taught me very, very clearly how important it is to get to know how people are, get to know how people act, and get to know that the first person you meet or the first person that you feel really super passionately about is not necessarily a person you should be with forever. Because that steadfast rule doesn't pertain to real life. It doesn't have anything to do with actually how real life works.
Thank you so much, guys. Don't forget, every single Monday at 1 PM EST, you can watch ADVChina. You can watch me every single Wednesday at 1 PM EST, Laowinners. And right below that, you can watch SerpentZA just in time for a beer on Friday at 1 PM EST.